welcome everyone who's here to our panel this morning. We've got now between now and 12:30 to discuss women in technology in the Northeast and how we can connect. And thank you to Dynamo for hosting us at the Dynamo Conference 2021. So I'm Rachel Pattinson, and I'm in theory chairing this panel today, but I'm hoping it will be more of a conversation. I think we've already started in that way. And we do have hopefully 4 other speakers with us today who you can see 3 of them on screen, Joanne Berry, Louise Doyle and Farea Isman. Our 4th speaker is Catherine Cardos, and hopefully she'll get here soon and navigate Hopin. So what are we talking about in our panel today? Well, I think it's fair to say, hopefully, that women are underrepresented in the technology sector. And statistics around this vary, but figures from the WISE campaign tell us that women only make up about 16% of the UK's technology workforce. And I think we'd need to reach about 30% to reach any kind of critical mass. And I think there's an issue with the pipeline as well, because young women coming through aren't seeing technology as a first choice career. So a recent report by PwC, where they surveyed young women, I think only 3% of them said a career in technology was their first choice. So one thing that's been happening over the last few years is we've seen women in technology networks appearing nationally and in different regions. And there are some specialist networks here in the Northeast. And the aim of these is to connect and support and promote women working in technology. And I think some of our panelists might speak about some of those today. But what we don't have at the moment is a regional women in tech network in the Northeast that connects and supports all women working in technology or studying technology or championing technology. And that's something I'd like us to discuss further. So some housekeeping briefly. You'll see Sophie is here helping facilitate our session. Thank you, Sophie. So please just feel free to introduce yourself on the chat, add any comments. Next to that, you'll see a couple of polls. Please answer those if you'd like at some point during the session. And at the very far of the menu on the right, you'll see Q&A. So if you want to ask a question, we'd love to hear what you think and we'd love to answer your questions. So please ask us anything you'd like us to discuss on this topic. So we're still waiting for Catherine, but let's start the rest of the introductions and we can always come back to her if, or it might be a lovely panel of 3 panelists today, who knows? So yeah, let's start with introductions. So if I can just ask the rest of you, please, to just tell us a bit about you and your work, and then maybe any opening thoughts on women in technology, and maybe just a couple of minutes each. And let's start first with Farea, as it's the Dynamo conference.
Okay, thank you very much, Rachel. I'm very, very pleased to be here. My name is Farea Usman. I am the EDI, Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Innovation Manager at Dynamo Northeast. I'm also the founder and CEO of a charity named as Being Women, and we operate in Northumberland. And we work towards digital skills as one of our focus for women. So that's something, this topic is very, very close to me because I, as a woman in Northeast and in technology, is something I'm very proud to achieve, but also as a woman from ethnically diverse community, which is less even women in technology. So that is something that we really need to focus. As an opening thought, why I believe that connecting women in technology is important is because I think as women, we all share a common goal to support each other, whether it's technology, whether it's developing developing them in other way. So I think it is very important because we all then contribute to the development of women in the technology sector.
Thank you, Farea. I'm going to go sort of clockwise around my screen. So go next then to Louise to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. It's really good to be here. And thank you to Rachel for asking me to come along, which I think was on the back of me keyboard worrying my way through a survey that Farea actually put out a little while ago from Dynamo in this particular space. So I'm the co-founder of a tech business called Mesmer. Probably the best place to start is to say prior to that I spent 10 years working in the post-16 education sector. So the problem we identified was a very niche one that relates to quality management, and we therefore set out to build a tech solution, that would solve that problem. So I don't think I'm wholly unusual in saying that I'm one of those people who runs a tech business but does not have a background in technology, and most of our client base is outside of the Northeast as well. So when I've had the opportunity during COVID, I have to say in particular, to reflect on that, what that's meant for me, I think, for a lot of years is a sense of looking through the window, into the Northeast tech community, if you like, not particularly feeling part of it and not entirely knowing how to become part of it either. So when this came up, I thought that's a really interesting point of exploration and reflection for me, which is that because of where I've come from and where we spend our time, or is some of that actually related to as a woman within the space, not fully understanding how to engage with it? If I look at my orbit of our advisors, our potential funders, all of those people, they're all men that I deal with. I deal with very few women in this space. So it's great to hear Rachel's opening comments around, which is particularly important to me, about how we encourage girls and women who may want to change careers, in fact, not only to come into this space, the very broad church that technology is, but actually to stay within it and to really engage within that community. So Farea's points around, how do we encourage that and support it are really dear to my heart. I said in the opening comments when we were chatting before we started that Jamie Hardesty was in my head before, and it was actually because he shared via Twitter earlier this week some of the findings, I think, from the Startup Blink report that was very much focused around, where we are as a region within the tech space, both nationally and internationally, and we're not in the top 10 yet. So whilst we position today, I think, as a female discussion, actually we've got so much more ambition that we could realise within our region, and we sure as hell are not going to do that unless we deal with the fact that we've only got 16% of women, I think Rachel's earlier stat was, who feel engaged within this particular space. So looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have today, and hopefully it just being the start of one as well.
Great, thank you, Louise. And so to round off the introductions then, Joanna.
Thanks very much. I'm Joanna. I tripped and fell into technology, I suppose. So I'm born and brought up in the northeast of England, really, really proud to be from this region and largely educated up here as well. So I'm currently an associate professor of entrepreneurship up at Durham, sideways, at Durham University Business School. I'm a director at Durham Energy Institute, and the energy and engineering sector is one that is woefully short of female input, although I'm doing my bit around that with a new Master of Energy Systems Management that I've just put together with the engineering faculty, where we have 8 studentships that are all devoted to supporting people in the EDI space, 25% scholarships. But my first interaction, if you like, with tech was in 1997 when I was given the job of putting together the McLaren Formula One website. I was given £250,000 and told to go and make a website. I hadn't got a clue what I was doing. Nobody had a clue what they were doing. It was brilliant. I was just given a budget and told, go make it so. And it was absolutely fascinating. And I learned an enormous amount about, well, I learned probably more than anybody at that time knew, really, other than the people that I was giving huge amounts of money to, who must have thought that their ship had just come in, and docked and wasn't going anywhere for a very long time. We lost an R&D tax credits case, if you remember the R&D tax credits thing, where you could get tax credits for being innovative and clever and creative, largely because I spent 3 days standing up in the Old Bailey trying to convince a 65-year-old judge who didn't know what email was that tech was creative. And he thought creativity was paintbrushes. he didn't see that innovation and creativity was something that happened with a keyboard as well. You know, it was just the most fascinating, well, one of the most fascinating periods of my life. And so I sort of tripped and fell again, because career is a verb as well as a noun, into academia. And my PhD was all about the impact of technology on the music industry. And again, that wasn't because I was any good at technology. I'm not particularly. I was fascinated by the business of music and how technology had blown it apart. And that was started in 2003. You know, Facebook wasn't really a thing. Friends Reunited was where it was all at, and MySpace. So I've followed technology along as a bit of a groupie, really. It might be more of a roadie than a groupie. And we're now in a place where I feel like I've watched it maybe as an interested observer rather than as a participant. And I have seen all the way along that women have not been involved in the conversation for reasons that I find very difficult to understand, other than the fact that maybe we are interested in people and getting out of a room less than we are sitting at a keyboard, and there is a sort of psychological difference. I'm not quite sure. So when we ask about whether there is no general women in tech network that connects all women interested in working in and championing technology, and the big question being whether we need one and what it could add to existing support, I think we probably need one, because I believe in the importance of equality and diversity and inclusivity. I've got sort of 1.5 questions. First of all, you have to ask what the edges are of the technology sector, because do we need a network in technology? It leads me to ask to define technology, and technology isn't a thing. It's not one thing. It's everywhere now. Can you really define technology to the extent that you can have a network in technology without touching on so many other things that it becomes almost meaningless? But that's possibly a conversation for another day. Secondly, the big question, I think, is, are we talking here about equity or equality? Because equality, I think, is about each individual or each group of people being given the same resources and the same opportunities. Equity recognizes that each person has different circumstances and allocates the exact resources and the exact opportunities that they need to reach an equal outcome, right? Which is a slightly different thing. So what could a general women in tech network in the Northeast add to the existing support? If we agree we need one, then I think the answer is probably mentoring. Mentoring isn't easy. It's not easy to set up. It's not easy to do. It's not easy to end, but it can assist in achieving equity, the understanding that everyone has different circumstances. It can help to allocate more precise resources and opportunities to reach an equal outcome, which is what we want, isn't it? And mentors can be diverse themselves. They don't have to be male or female or bi or L or B or T or Q or plus or whatever. I think reverse mentoring can be incredibly powerful, putting younger members or younger employees, younger members of a team together with senior team members to mentor them on very specific topics around strategy or cultural relevance, to help them to increase retention of younger generations, which is increasingly important, and to share digital skills, to drive culture change, to promote diversity. You know, I mentioned to my 20-year-old son the other day that a friend of mine's son had come out, and he said to me, "As what?" Which made me think. And a mentor isn't always for life. You know, you can ask for a mentor, you can try and find a mentor for a particular situation. Nothing wrong with that. So that would be my particular take on this conversation, and I'd be interested in any thoughts or questions.
Well, I think actually I'd like to pick up on something you just said, and I just sort of saw a lot of nods from Farea around that conversation about equality and equity, and I know this is something that you're looking at closely with Dynamo. Oh, Farea, I think you're on mute.
I think what Joanne was saying is very interesting. Yes, we really talk so much about equality, but equity is entirely different. And because I'm here as a woman of color in tech in Northeast, which is very rare as well, and we have to, I think it's a time we need to be very honest with what we see and don't see diversity in visuals only, because we are very good in seeing and get fooled by the visuals, which a lot of people put as pictures when they advertise. In reality, is way too different. And I think as a Northeast and championing something in Northeast, we have to first see the real pictures. I'm not saying that the tech companies do not want to hire the ethnically diverse people or women. And what I'm trying to say is they find it very difficult to retain them. The reason behind it is the culture, the work culture, the stereotyping, and then the gender pay gap and the ethnically diverse pay gap. Obviously, these are the things that this is not in our control, but the tech companies have the control over it. So yes, we can talk about everything. Okay, let's connect women into technology. Let's connect diverse women into technology. But we are not going to be able to achieve it if we don't partner or if we don't um, engage with men or boys or the people who lead the tech companies, because it's very critical to engage men and boys as well, and the people who are running these tech companies when you talk about gender equality and when you talk about ethnically diverse equality or equity. Because I have seen, I really get very fascinated to apply for tech organizations on the job, but I don't, because maybe my English is not well, maybe I have a language barrier, maybe I might not be able to do jobs because I have childcare. So there are loads of other things as well to be seen when you talk about women. I think the perception has to be changed as well. The more understanding about women and the ethnically diverse cultures is very important in Northeast. We can't just talk about it. It's the time when we have to really back our statements with actions. Even if one tech company takes that action, it is a change. We are not asking everybody to change rapidly, because it doesn't happen like that. It takes consistent work on it. So through Dynamo as well, my focus is not only to talk about race or culture diversity, but to talk about diversity as a whole, which is much, much broader than color or race or gender.
There's Rachel, do you mind if I pick up on just a couple of things that that the ladies have said, and also something that Charlie's put in the chat as well, because there's kind of a link across to it as well. I think there's a really great example of the issue that we've got around equitability, and it's the greater impact on women of COVID. So actually that challenge of the fact that there is more home, whilst there's been more home working, women have taken the burden in the main that relates to what we're doing at home, looking after children and so on and so forth. And that in itself, those type of challenges are the things that I want to be able to talk to other women about. I want to understand how we can better support our current and future employees to be their most successful, because you can't, with any kind of HR policy, whether it's a business like mine of less than 10 employees or it's Sage, you've still got to think about those differences and the requirements that we can understand better. As Farea says, you've first got to understand them to then be able to do something about them. And I think if we can play a role in influencing that, then there is something potentially for us to do. Charlie makes the point, which is something that's so dear to my heart, I will avoid going on about it for an hour, and Rachel, you'll need to shut me up, but I am going to comment on it because it's so important. So I chair a regional hub of primary schools, as well as sitting on the board of the Excellent Education Partnership Northeast, as one of our very many excellent education institutes in the Northeast. And the thing that we are working so hard on a primary level, in conjunction with the LEP and lots of other people, is how do we bring awareness of careers into primary children? So you're not advising them which career to do, you're creating awareness. And Charlie makes a great point of, it's not a linear route to a tech job. It's not just about software developers, although at the moment, I can't get them. It's not just about that. It's the breadth and the edges, I think Joanne called it, of the sectors that we work in and the occupations that we're talking about. I think we could play a really important role in finding those women in technology, bringing them in front of the children that we need to bring them in front of, in order that we can help not raise the aspiration. The aspirations are there. It's a misconception that aspirations aren't there. Knowing how to get there when your parents may not have the resources available to support that is where the issue is. And if we can play a collective role in making a dent in that in our region, then I would be really excited about a network that perhaps supports and exists alongside some of those that are already there.
Do you think part of the positive benefit or positive impact of the pandemic might have been to raise awareness of the importance of technological capacity, tech capability in kids.
Yeah,
that might be something. Whilst obviously the resource has been pretty woeful, and getting tech to kids has become something that's been front page news, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Do you think that possibly that might be something that's come out of it?
I really do. I think, there are, it feels cliche, doesn't it, that, when we talk about the positives that come out of the pandemic and how we, cling on to those and let the other things.
I almost didn't say what I just said.
But it's true though, isn't it? And just because it's cliche doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about them and pick up on those things. And certainly Jamie, who's on today, and I spoke a little while back, I think in January at some point, and my reflection on me, and it's kind of back to my opening point I was making, is that COVID has, the positive for me on a personal level is it has allowed me to connect with a community that I have not been particularly connected to before, because I was quite happy in my other one, thank you very much. But actually what it's allowed me to do is say my business, our business, Karen and I, my co-founder's business, could be more successful if we were better engaged in the region. And as we tried to do that, we realized that we aren't the only ones that have skills shortages, that we find difficult recruiting from, that actually our drive to make sure that apprenticeships and so on and so forth are there. It is something that I want to take away and learn from this. And I think you're spot on, Joanna. It's actually, we have a platform now to speak to young children and teachers who perhaps did not engage with technology in the same way before, to open that door to then have more conversations, in this agenda, very specifically about how can we help more young girls to see a possible future in a space that perhaps at the moment they don't see it in. Because it's not I think Farea said it's not a short-term fix, is it? It's not about what we're going to do in the next 6 months, although I'm not suggesting they're not there. It is about that, 4, 5, 6, 10, 15, 20 years. How do we shift that dialogue at the moment right down to primary school level, in order to help young girls to see a different future for themselves and a different future in the region?
So should this be our job, or should this be part of the levelling up agenda? Should this be about turning ballet dancers into cyberpunks? To what extent should we be shouting at the government, not just to move a bit of the bank up here and to send a few bankers who can afford houses in Darras Hall or wherever, but to what extent should we be calling on the government to tip the seesaw this way, thank you very much, and be embedding a little bit more of not just their people and their bankers, but their expenditure on upskilling some of our, I'm trying to think and speak at the same time. That's always really dangerous. But do you know what I mean? To what extent should we be responsible for this? And to what extent is this something that the government should be doing? And I spit the word the government at the moment because I'm so cross of the boys playing in the sandpit while people like us are getting on trying to do business as usual.
Yeah. What do you think, Rachel? I know you're in theory in facilitator mode today, but you pulled this together for a reason. I think that's a great point Joanna makes about the crossover between policy and what we can do at grassroots level. So what do you want to get, and where do you see the success as being?
Oh, I don't know. Well, I think I pulled this panel together because I was having a few thoughts at once, and part of the thinking was around the underrepresentation of women in tech, and I was particularly thinking about that in my work context. And then I was also thinking about the successes that we have seen in the Northeast of networks. So I was thinking about things like the Social Leaders Network, for example, who I was hearing some information about. And what they've really used that network for is to to connect people, but it's really what's happened out of those connections, in that they've been able to join together to advocate for funding, to set up projects, to build capacity in the region. And I guess it was kind of joining these two thoughts up for me, that I wondered whether there was a role for networks in that sort of way. Yes, it's great if a network runs some events, if it brings people together, if it promotes women. But I think it was more about what could a network start, and what could it, longer term, what could it do? But just reflecting on your conversations there, I think that yeah, clearly digital is a huge issue, like as in a huge space to be thinking about. Where are the boundaries of that? I totally agree. I think is, you know, every business in the pandemic has had to become a digital business, really, to some extent. And again, reflecting on Farea's comments, of course, we're not just talking about women, we're talking about kind of all kinds of intersectionality here in the digital space.
You said something there that it's that point around the boundaries again, and I wonder if perhaps where the gap is. I'll always be, you know, in the game of how do we influence policy at a national level, however painful, you know, that can be. But why the hell not? You know, is if we've got an opportunity to have a different voice or a more let's call it a niche voice, then why would we not want to have it? I wonder perhaps if, you know, some of the debate to have is even whether or not we even need to create the boundaries around it, that actually sometimes the issue is that networks, by the very nature of what they do, create a boundary. You know, you're either in the club or you're out the club, and actually maybe it's not to decide if you consider yourself to be a woman working in technology, whether it's any of our, you know, really diverse experience. What the hell, you know, you've got a voice and you're important, so why wouldn't we welcome people into that? I think what becomes difficult is what your message is, particularly where you're trying to influence policy around it. So I think, you know, what you said there kind of opens up for me a different point of reflection about where I look for boundaries. Maybe we don't need them.
Charlie's got a comment here. It makes me ask the question. Somebody has to tell the government what to do. A network could help with that. Who currently tells the government what to do on technology? And, you know, who is the big tech voice to government? Is there one? I'm not thinking necessarily regionally, although I'm sure that there probably are regional voices. Sue Black probably is called upon occasionally, I would imagine. I don't know whether anybody from Dynamo is called upon to inform Number 10 at any point. Do we have any regional voices?
Well, I don't know, but yes, I'm aware of Dr. Sue Black, because obviously I am sitting here only because I was a part of Tech Up Women program. Yeah. I got to know, okay, there is something like, if I share my story, I come from a country where you can hardly afford a laptop or a computer. And I was so interested in tech because my parents wanted me to be some scientist or professor, but unfortunately I could not afford, my parents couldn't afford, and we had to like save money. So my dreams died down. But then I came across this Tech Up Women program and I applied, I got selected. I was like, okay, well, I might not do it. But I did. I became a business analyst. I did artificial intelligence, and I'm sitting here. So you see, it just took some of the step. But the reason why I'm mentioning Tech Up Women is it is such a diverse program created by Dr. Sue Black, retaining 100 women into tech careers, and it was supported by universities. But what I'm really surprised to see is why it's not coming up again for the next 100 women. Is it a lack of funding? Is it like, have we lost trust? Is it like, how do we make sure that it happens again?
Well, and there is only one Sue Black. It could just be a matter of bandwidth for her. She's a busy lady, you know. She is the university evangelist, and she has kids and a family, and there's been COVID and.
Yeah,
and she has to get her hair coloured occasionally. She doesn't stay that colour pink.
You see, in telling the government on that,
I don't know is the answer to you.
On that question to telling the government is, I think not only Sue Black, we all have the power. To tell the government, and we all can make it. It only takes one voice to make that change. The thing is, are we making that voice together? If I make that voice, how many people are going to have that alliance?
And where is the microphone? I mean, where do you go? Because very well, all of us having all these voices from all over the place, that's too diffuse. It's too easy to ignore. It needs to be one microphone with lots of voices rather than lots of voices that can be just battered away and ignored. So Jamie's got a comment on the side there, which is an interesting one too. Rachel, I'm sorry, I'll shut up because I'm conscious Catherine came in for a minute. She didn't like what she heard.
Go on, Rachel. I'll let you pick up on the comments in the chat, and then.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, as Catherine's disappeared again, because that was going to be my next kind of thing to mention. But yeah, I mean, Jamie's put in the chat that David Dunn is the only individual outside of London on the government's Digital Economy Council. I mean, talk about diversity there. That's the only person outside of London as well. So I mean, it's great that we have that support there, but that's not great, is it, really? So. But Farea, I think the Tech Rep Women programme is a perfect example of how a kind of Northeast organisation can support women in accessing a digital career where they haven't before. And I think that's one of the challenges. I think if you started your career in a different area or with a different focus, how do you move into technology? You know, what are the steps? And I don't think that's very obvious sometimes.
Yeah, I think Tech Up Women was a mixture of so many things. As Joanna was highlighting the importance of mentoring, there was mentors as well. I'm sitting here because I had a brilliant mentor from Northeast. So, otherwise I wouldn't have been this confident. Seriously, as an immigrant, I live in fears. I would have never thought of entering into a tech company, then facing all these stereotyping. But Tech Up Women actually made me who I am today. So I think if one program can make somebody's and change somebody's life like me, a mentor like Marianne Whitfield can change my life. I think we all have that power. We all just have to connect. And I totally agree with what Joanna has mentioned today about mentoring, about reverse mentoring. I think that's a brilliant idea to be introduced in schools, colleges, in all fields. We run a small charity. We have service users who don't speak English, but we have today, because we are celebrating Refugee Week, we have awarded around 48 people with City and Guilds online qualifications. Now, these are those women who have never had a computer, who don't even know how to eat, what is digital skills, but they've all passed that. So how did we make it happen? By not highlighting their barrier, but counteracting that barrier.
But and
Making
also,
those changes.
and also, Farea, there's the reverse mentoring, but also now, this is 2021, right? The internet is 25 years old. There's quite enough room now for older people who are perfectly capable of being tech savvy and who maybe are heading towards retirement to be doing a little bit of whatever the reverse of reverse mentoring is. People who aren't necessarily full-time busy, who've done the startup, who've done the whole roadmap of the business life cycle, to look back over and start to work mentoring in a sort of a reverse mentoring sense. I've just seen in the chat, though, unfortunately, it appears, is it Melanie, who says that Sue just can't find funding?
Yeah.
Melanie Dunnett says there's no funding for a repeat of Tech Up, which is horrendous.
Yeah, because I know I've been a part of it, and
it is an amazing program.
Yeah, it is an amazing program, and I think there were amazing women who have gone out to do so many different things in the world and in the UK, and it was very diverse. So one thing that I really like about Tech Up Women is when it says that it promotes equality, diversity, and inclusion, it
really does, yeah.
It's
Catherine's back, and we've only got 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'm really mindful of time. I just want to pick up on there's two Emmas that have spoken in the chat, and it's really good to see Emma's point about the value of the network. It was the one relating to career change I was picking up on. I'm an enormous advocate of apprenticeships and work heavily in that space, and have done for many years. And what we are yet to fully support companies to understand is the value of using apprenticeships for career changes, that you don't actually have to leave your job and go back to university on a full-time basis in order to be able to move into many careers, but in particular for me, selfishly, a tech one, whether that be through the colleges or the universities or the private training providers who are supporting that. There is a job that we could do to help businesses understand how to make that work as part of their workforce development strategy, with some amazing apprenticeships that are available. This isn't about one type of education being better than another. It's about how do we harness all of them to ensure people have the opportunities to make changes in their lives when they want to. Emma, I think your point's well made. It's great to hear that there are career changes and examples of that, and I think we should share more examples of people who do that. We have the mechanism to do that. We're just not doing it very well at the moment. And I think we can play a role in helping people to understand how to make it work.
So I'm just conscious of the time. I just wanted to give you all just an opportunity for a final comment on this topic, or a kind of final thought you want to leave us with, really. So I don't know who wants to go first.
I would like to just leave with one thought, and that is we should embrace our local women.
Mm-hmm.
Let's stop looking, for models outside. We have a lot of local heroes. We have a lot of local women who are playing such an important part in diversity and making sure that the women voices are heard. Louis, we have Joanna, we have you, Rachel, who filled in a hero questionnaire and who was highlighted on the Dynamo report. So I think I just want to leave with a thought. Let's support each other, but let's dignify our local women who are playing a very important role in Northeast.
Oh, thanks, Farea. And Joanna and Louise.
Well, I think, first of all, Rachel, thank you for pulling this together. I'm really sad not to have heard from Catherine. I think she should have her very own personal panel, because we didn't get to hear her voice today. But also thanks to Charlie and Emma and Melanie for some great input. I think a crowdfund for Sue Black's next Tech Up iteration would be an awesome idea. Tip jar at the door for everybody leaving Dynamo today would probably pull it all together, to be honest. I can't imagine it's a hugely expensive program when you look at how much was spent on PPE. I'm sorry, I'm getting political, but dear Lord, it makes me cross to see the money that things get spent on that could be spent on valuable stuff like this. And a big cheer for apprenticeships left, right and centre. So I'm with you on that, Louise, as well. But if there was anything that I could do to get back into schools and get girls involved in coding and getting involved in the whole, demystifying and desensitizing the STEM agenda across the board, I would do it. I do it whenever I'm asked. And I think all of us should. We say yes when asked to do anything like that, basically, go, male or female. Louise?
I feel so I came into the conversation as a keeping an open mind about how I would leave it, in thinking even this short conversation about is there space here for us to do something different. I leave the conversation feeling motivated that there is, and it's a conversation that this is just the first step in, Rachel, that I would really love to keep having that continue with, and seeing other people talking in the chat and hearing from these guys just really affirms that for me. So I'm excited to see what we could do and really have an impact with the support of the many other people, as Farea said, who are amazing in all flavours within this region, who can make this work.
Yeah, thanks all of you, and thank you to everyone in the chat as well. We've had some fantastic contributions and some really interesting insights there. And Jamie, absolutely yes to helping us and maybe working with Dynamo to set something up in this space. And yeah, I agree. I think this is where I started with this panel idea, to be honest with you, is just that I had this kind of question, and I thought, you know what, I think this is what we should do, is just use this as a starting point to get talking about how we can better connect women in this area in digital. So thank you so much to all of our speakers, Joanna, Louise and Farea, and to Catherine as well, who's popped up briefly and popped up on the chat. And thank you to everyone who's joined us. And I think with that, we are about 1 minute before 12:30. So good timing.
That is impressive, Rachel.
Yes.
That's really good. Thank you, everyone. It's been really good. I've really enjoyed hearing from you, and I hope to speak to you all soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everybody.
You were great. Thank you.